Hello and welcome to this video in which we'll be solving the questions of a reading comprehension exercise from CAT 2024 slot 1. I've already made a video in which I have discussed how to read the passage and what the passage is about. So please watch that video before you come to this particular video. So this passage was about crafts, and it's all about an analysis of the field of craftsmanship and crafts and how it is different from management, where is its market, whether it supports creativity, whether it doesn't, what can be the challenges that it might face if it becomes organized, what can be the challenges it can face from production industry. So these are the things that have been discussed in the passage. So let's go to the questions and let's see how to answer them. So question 1 says we can infer from the passage that medieval crafts guilds resembled mass production in that both. Okay. So first, a couple of options are very simple to eliminate. B is definitely incorrect. Focused excessively on product quality. So mass-produced industries are not focusing on quality is given inside the passage as a fact that they are using standardized parts. But then quality is definitely better in crafts is what the author is saying inside the passage for sure. That's why people are willing to pay higher for them as well. So B is not the correct answer. And another option which is not at all discussed in the passage is D, because D says did not always imply egalitarian production processes. So production process being egalitarian is not being discussed. Egalitarianism is being discussed with respect to crafts, and when they make guilds, then they don't treat everyone equally. It is being said inside the passage, so D is not the correct answer for that reason. But production process being egalitarian and equal for everyone or not, neither with respect to crafts, and maybe in mass production it can be implied, but the author is not talking about that inside the passage at all. That's why D is not the correct answer. People often mark A as the correct answer because medieval craft skills have been talked about in the last paragraph, and that paragraph tells us about how when guilds become very organized and they make it a monopoly and don't let others get in. But the question is a logical structure question, which is asking us that what connects both craft guilds and mass production. So how are both of these resembling each other? And with respect to mass production, restricting people's entry has not been talked about in the passage. Whereas if you go back to the passage, you will realize that the last paragraph where medieval craft skills are being talked about, the paragraph starts with history also suggests that link between crafts and creativity is not automatic. So it starts with this sentence, which means that the author is trying to make the point that why crafts and creativity are not linked. And entire passage is also talking about how mass production is not creative. It creates a kind of an environment where people are working on individual tasks and then individual creativity is not being let to pour in. Everything looks standardized, everything looks the same. So it's not a creative pursuit. And that is why the answer is C and not A. Tough question, I feel. Although I didn't feel it to be really tough, but then when I spoke to students about this particular question, a lot of people got this question incorrect. So I would say that between A and C, it's a 50-50 for the sake of being kind to students. But I think that if we, again, read the question very carefully and we're trying to find resemblance between craft guilds and mass production, then C is the only correct answer. So reading question becomes very, very important. Otherwise, people do get confused with A quite a lot. In question number 2 says the most recent revival in interest in the crafts as a result of the emergence of all of the following except. Again, this is a very typical CAT question. It's a stupid question at the same time. It's a very beautiful question that you have to go back to the passage, because if you don't, all the options seem to make sense. So why are people now interested in crafts? That is basically given in the third paragraph, or rather the fourth paragraph, where the author is talking about two potential markets, that why are people becoming more interested in crafts. There are two markets for it. One is consumers who are willing to pay a premium price for goods that are deemed to be of extra quality. Second market lies in those consumers who wish to purchase to support local workers or to reduce their environmental impact. These are the three things that have been mentioned in the passage about where from the market and interest in crafts is coming from. So if we go back to the question, we have to look for options which are talking about these things. So greater interest in buying locally produced goods, that's been given as a second point. Niche market for discerning buyers. Discerning buyers are who are willing to pay extra for quality products, that's been given. Concerns about the environmental impact, that's been given. A although makes a lot of sense, supporting individual creations. That is what locally produced goods means, as opposed to mass-produced objects. So A is actually C just rephrased. But C is given in the passage directly. A is a modified version of it. That's why A becomes incorrect according to the passage. That's why I call it a stupid yet beautiful question. Like it's a proper test that who is making an effort to go back to the passage and match the options with exactly what has been given inside the passage. If you're doing that, then too you should get correct. And this is what I encourage all my students to do, that irrespective of how sure you are of what is given in the passage, make an effort to go back to the passage. You will not make mistakes in questions like question number 2. Excuse me. Third question says the author questions the ability of crafts to create substantial employment opportunities. This is an easy question. Second to last paragraph talks about the fact that how regulatory hoops makes it so that only larger companies will succeed. That's why A is the automatic correct answer. I don't think you even need to read B, C, and D to figure out why they are incorrect. In fact, if you read them, regulation and regulatory hoops are not being talked about in any of the options and directly given inside the second to last paragraph that A is the correct answer. So 3 also, if you go back to the passage, it's a very, very easy mark. So 3 is a very easy question. Fourth question is kind of tricky because number 1, I have to read the question very carefully because it has a double negative. Which one of the following statements is not inconsistent with? Not inconsistent, minus into minus is plus, so is consistent with the views stated in the passage. So what is stated in the passage? So couple of options that we should eliminate is D. First option, absolutely incorrect, because opposite of D is being proved by the author in the last paragraph, that there is not an intrinsic connection between crafts and creativity, that even crafts can actually stop creativity. That's the point that the author is making in the last paragraph. So D is not the correct answer. Next option, which is not correct, is C, because he says the agile movement in software is a throwback to the tenets of medieval crafts guilds. Crafts guilds has been talked about in the last paragraph. Agile movement is being talked about 2 paragraphs before. They have no direct relation. Apart from the fact that agile movement is being talked about with how management principles are trying to bring in creativity and individual touch to their processes. So I think C should be an easy eliminator. Now, among A and B, I can understand a bit of confusion between A and B, but if you read B carefully, it's a very important word to focus upon in B, because B says the arts and craft movement was initially inspired by the American system of production. So if I go back to the passage, and if I read that paragraph in which the first arts and craft movement is being talked about, it says that this process created its own reaction. The American system happened, and as a reaction to it, the arts and crafts movement began. So it was not inspired by it. Being inspired by something means that they did it, I want to do something like it. No, it was a reaction to it. It was something that happened against, as a step against, as a measure against the American system. So that's why, because it was not inspired by it, that's what makes option B incorrect. And A is given in the passage, creativity in the crafts could be stifled if the market for artisan goods becomes too organized. So A is given in the last paragraph. That's last sentence, in fact, directly states A. That's why A should be an easy mark. I can understand a bit of a confusion between A and B. But I think if you compare A and B very carefully, there is no reason that you can give to mark A as an incorrect answer. So in this particular passage, I would say 3 questions are very doable. Question number 3, question number 4, question number 2. Provided you go back to the passage, 2 is very doable. 1, I can understand, I think, people making mistakes, because so many of the students have made a mistake in questions like question 1. But personally, if I believe that if reading comprehension is a strength, and if you have gotten down the process of solving RC questions to the T, even 1 you should get correct. So despite being a longer read, I believe this is one of the easier reading comprehension exercises of CAT 2024 slot 1. I believe that really strong students should be getting 4 out of 4 correct. At least 3 out of 4 correct should be scored in a passage like this. If not, your RC practice and the approach that you're taking to questions and options needs a lot of work. Thank you.